related directly or indirectly to this virus. We have displaced over 30 million people in our workforce. One of the things that I've come to understand and appreciate and want to impart on you today is that there are many types of loss that we experience. Loss is not just totally owned by death in itself. It could be loss of financial flexibility. It can be loss of our improved or perfect health. It can be a loss of a job title that you took great pride in, that you spent possibly even in some cases decades building and cultivating and owning and developing, that for due to financial restraints and the decisions of corporations, people no longer have those titles. Loss takes on many different forms. The other thing that I have come to understand about the whole area of grief and loss is the fact that out of all the diversity that we have in the world, the fact of loss is something that we share throughout the entire human family. Very few people at one point or another in their life have not lost something that they find dear or that they value. So what I would like to do is I have put together a presentation today that I'll kind of use as our guide for my comments, and hopefully allows you to think of some questions or possibly even contemplate how they may really resonate in your own life. But again, I want to thank the District 8 Toastmasters group for really providing me with this extraordinary opportunity. When James asked me to do it, it didn't take me very long to accept it, but I am very humbled and honored to have this opportunity today. So let me take a look at its presentation. I just wanted to share this one. This is my picture of me and my wife. Just spent 22 and a half extraordinary years, together. And I would have never thought that when I, met this extraordinary woman that I would ever have to spend any time in this world without her. But, again, as she would probably be telling me, oh, Terrell, don't make a big deal out of it, and definitely don't mess it up at this point. I will be back together again someday, and that's something that I hold on to. I'd always like to talk a little bit about that, define how we see, or how I will define grief, or the topic that I'm talking about when I present. And the definition of grief that I would like to kind of base our talk today on is this definition. Grief is deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death, highly felt when a bond or affection had been formed. Deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death, highly felt when a bond or affection had been formed. The other thing that I would like to just give you for a moment is a thought by what many consider the standard bearer of the area of grief and loss, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, along with someone later in her life that she started to collaborate with, John Kessler. That definition said this, just a thought. The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over it. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again. You will never be the same, nor should you want to. I was so personally so glad to have found this thought, because what it did was it helped me to really feel that many of the emotions and feelings that I were going through someone else understood. There ends up being many times a sort of isolation sometimes as you go through a significant change in your life. It will tell you, this thought kind of really encapsulates for me the entire process that I went through early and really live in now. It was so refreshing and so freeing for me to hear that you will not get over it. Because in my life, throughout life, and just, many times we learn from our family and traditions, whether it be individual, family, or cultural. We learn about reacting to events based on how your family did. For decades, I heard the fact that says, I wonder why that person's not over that yet. And when I came across this statement and it said, you won't get over it. And then in the end, when it simply said, nor should you want to, that was a really huge relief on my part. And I'll forever be indebted to Ms. Kubler-Ross and Mr. Kessler for putting that statement together in my life as I formulate my approach to managing, the loss of my wife and many other things of significance that I will discuss, during this talk. I'm sorry, I'm going to be moving this around a little bit. But what is loss? And in many ways right now, grief and loss have almost become synonymous with each other. Though it's not inappropriate in my view for them to sort of be married together in some ways, they aren't exactly the same. And for the purposes of the time we're going to share together today, I want to use this definition of loss: the act or process of losing something or someone that holds value to you. Now, it is a very similar definition to grief. However, the point that I would like to emphasize with you is the very first line where it talks about the act or process. Those two words are very important to me, and that's sort of how I have differentiated between grief, the things that I grieve, and the things that I lost. And so it's the act or process of losing something or someone that holds value to you. Let me use this illustration. If someone was bold enough to look at maybe their financial statements over the last quarter or so, you're going to see maybe in many cases some numbers that you don't really like. Especially, as a person that probably is beyond their peak earning years, the thought of losing money at this point makes me kind of think, oh, do I have enough time to recover from this? That's a loss. The money that may not show up on the bottom line is a loss, but that's completely different than my grief. So the act or the process of losing something or someone that holds value to you is a bit different, though very similar, of the process of grief. Another statement that I've come to like is, don't close the book when bad things happen in your life. Just turn the page and begin a new chapter. And those pages in life turn whether we want to or not. Many times those pages in life change. We don't always control the fact that we do. Many times the circumstances of life will provide and force us to open a new chapter in our lives. I want to talk a little bit about the process, and this is where I'll spend most of my time. I've come to approach, and I really believe that my survival or my mental thought or what some people could call my new worldview, is based on the process in which I manage my life. And I have learned to manage my life and to move forward without, my wife, who was such a key role in the rhythm of my life and how I shared this life and how I looked at this world. And I wanted to share what I see as 5 key points in the process of learning to live after loss. And the first point I want to talk with is take time to heal. When we lose something of significance, when we lose a person that we felt deeply about to grieve, we have to take time to heal. Many times we have to take time to heal physically. If you happen to move into a state of depression, many times you experience a loss of energy. Many times we not only alter or find ourselves being altered physically, but mentally as well. So oftentimes we sometimes err by trying to get back into the routine too soon. Just a point of personal transparency here. I had my wife's funeral on Friday and returned to the office on Monday. Bad decision. I survived it, but it was not the smartest thing that I could do. When I look back and reflect on that now, a lot of that was just based on wanting to make it appear to others that I would be okay. And the reality of it is it was far too early to be okay. So I'm a huge believer in taking the time to heal. With that being said, I do understand that there are many circumstances out there. What if you lost a spouse and you're still raising children? What if financially you're not in a position to be able to take a lot of time off? I just so want to recommend that in whatever form that time may be, is we need to take time, and I didn't put time in here, to heal, and I apologize for that. You have to spend some time just simply reflecting and repairing what you can, mentally as well as physically. The second point in the process is set reasonable expectations for yourself. And by reasonable expectations, it kind of goes back to what Ms. Kubler-Ross and Mr. Kessler talked about when they said, is it really a reasonable goal to feel that you'll get over it? Or is it a more reasonable goal to set, to learn to manage it? Getting over would almost falsely give you a sense that it doesn't affect me anymore. I don't know if that really is a goal that we should set. Is it reasonable to believe that you can return to your social circle as quickly as you might want to? Or sometimes that you might even, get invitations to. Many times on the social side of things, that was something that I also had to find out that changed a lot more than what I even imagined. Never in my thoughts during the time after I experienced loss do I realize that when you lose that person, you have many times multiple losses within that. There are many people that were integral parts of our social circle of my wife and I that I have never seen nor talked to after the funeral was over. Many people who I kind of looked at the fact that, oh, they were our friends, sometimes it turns out that they were her friends. And I had to learn to accept that and just chalk that up to that learning curve. Setting reasonable expectations for yourself. Many people experience sort of a mental malaise or sort of confusion. Sometimes it's very difficult to get your thoughts together. I'd like to say that sometimes you even find that that mail starts to stack up on the table or wherever it is that your mail stacks up, because sometimes you just can't bring yourself to do it and approach it the way you did before. So what are those reasonable expectations? Where you may find yourself spending time just simply only having the strength to do the things that you have to do. And you may not do them as efficiently or as diligently as you did. However, let me say that this thing, that if it goes on for a period of time where it starts to affect your life in a negative way, then it may be time to reach out, and we'll talk about that in another couple of steps. The third part of the process, and a very important one, is that if you are able to build a team of helpers. And I say helpers from the standpoint of these are individuals that you trust, that you know that can meet your needs, whether it might be confidence, whether it might be just sitting with you and spend time. Maybe it's running errands for you. Others, it could simply be a gatekeeper, a person that you kind of filter the interactions between yourself and others for a period of time as you go through that period of healing, as you start to work on what my expectations are at this point, what can I handle and what I cannot handle. You know, I simply called the team that I build around me a little bit my console, my life console, my gatekeeper, that person that would kind of filter most of the interactions through, that honest broker, that person that may tell you some difficult truths when you need to hear them at the right time. That just person would had so much grace that they would just sit with you sometimes and just be in your presence sometimes, not necessarily to just do anything, but to just simply be there if you need them, if it was nothing more than just sit with you at that time. A person that you can be emotional around or tell the same story for the 17th or 18th time to, and they just nod and they smile and they laugh and they listen without judgment. Your team needs to consist of whoever it is you need to meet what you may require at that time. The fourth point that I want to talk about is never be afraid to ask for help. And that's not just professional help in the way of counseling, which I strongly believe, if necessary, it's a step that people should take. But simply that you might need help doing something as simple as going to the grocery store, you know, running an errand, making a phone call. Never be afraid to ask for help. It is so difficult many times as a person who prides himself of being a self-sufficient person to do simply that, just simply ask for help. As I said before, that if there are certain behaviors or things in your life that you need to take care of and you find them falling through in the gaps because you just can't bring yourself to do it, you may need to seek professional help. You may need to talk to your doctor about, you know, helping you be able to increase your energy or to be able to handle those things in your life that you know must be done, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. I was very fortunate, and I made the decision very early in my grief journey, as we call it many times in the community, to know that I needed to seek professional help. I did not want to give that responsibility or put that responsibility on family. Though they would have tried to do the best that they could, ultimately, their job was to just continue to love me if they would, to be there for me if I needed to. But the burden of trying to allow me or to help me to be better, I decided not to burden them with. I was very fortunate to find a young lady to be my grief counselor who I spent 18 months with, that I tell her to this day that I don't believe that I would have made it through or even be alive if I had not found her. Our relationship grew so close that she was the person who encouraged me to write the book, The First 365, just based on the sessions that we had and the views and the attitude and the approach that I expressed to her over those 18 months and the progress that we made together. She was the person who wrote the foreword, to my book, and I'll forever be grateful to her for the role that she played in my life and the ability that she gave me to have the courage to share such a delicate and personal part of my life as I'm doing with you all today. The fifth process that I want to talk about today, and there are definitely more processes in this, but I didn't want to give you too much in this short amount of time that we have together. But I think it is so important. You do not forget or do not hesitate in giving yourself permission to celebrate the small successes. Wow, I felt good enough today to join my friends or family for lunch. Wow, I went 2 or 3 nights without crying myself to sleep. Wow, I went through the mail and got everything up to date and sorted and paid this week. That's a success. You have to celebrate the small successes, because I am a strong believer in momentum. One good thing could lead to another good thing, which could lead to another good thing. And before you know it, you're making progress that you could not have imagined just a few weeks or months earlier that you'd ever be able to make. But as we celebrate these small successes, celebrating a small success is different than that old thought of now I've got over it. Very simply, many times, it's like you're getting on with it as opposed to getting over it. You're getting on with life and you're learning to live again. We use the term, and you hear the term very often now, about finding your new normal. It's become quite a catchphrase, but it does have quite a bit of truth to it. You do find your new normal, but very seldom is it the same. You no longer, as I've heard those words by Mr. Kessler and Ms. Kubler-Ross, it is so freeing to feel and to know that you don't have to get over it, but you definitely have to learn to manage it. And the fact that nor should you want to get over it. I never want to get over the loss, as I have experienced it now, of my loved ones. I am a person that I say, and I tell groups when I speak to them all the time, that have now experienced what I call the 4 corners of loss in my life. My parents are no longer alive, one corner of my life. My wife is no longer in my life, the second corner of my life. The third corner of my life is that I have lost a sibling. My older brother is no longer in my life. And the fourth corner of my life is I have also lost a child. So that, I say, is the 4 corners of my life. Each and every one of those losses have affected me in a different way. I am very fortunate to have the mental makeup to not be bitter on those things. I am saddened by them all, but I know that life has to continue on, and I have to find a way to learn to live after loss. So those are the processes that I wanted to share with you. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I talk about it some in the book, well, a lot in the book actually, and that is what I call the natural flow of life. The natural flow of life, in my view, is we have a tendency to look at life as spring, birth, summer, exploration, and growth, fall, maintenance, winter in many parts of the world, or when things get dormant, die, recycle. It's a little bit more of a less active period in many parts of the world. It just helps you to be able to rest and rejuvenate, the natural flow of life. In the world of grief, in the season of grief and loss, many ways life gets turned a bit upside down. And I call it the flow, life's flow when grieving. And the first of it is that you start in winter with a loss. You move to spring, you start to try some things, you might start to accept some invitations. Summer, you might start to find new habits or new interests. I call that the season of come on in, the water's fine. And then in the other season, you can be in fall, maintenance. That is that new normal, your new style. You've now adjusted to things after the loss. For instance, this is a point that I just thought of. Part of my spring was about 3.5 years ago, joining Toastmasters. As opposed to just coming home after work in the evening and just sitting and watching sports or just watching the same television shows all over again, I tried to reach out and to explore some avenues or some things of interest. One of the things that I always kind of liked was the opportunities to present and speak at work, and how is it that you can even get better, and how that you can continue to use that skill and maybe even use it in a work environment, but not just in a work environment. And that's where I found Toastmasters. Toastmasters was a part of the spring of my life, a part of helping me move into that season from that barren, that heavy laden, that dormant period of winter. Toastmasters was a part of the spring of my life, and I definitely am happy that I found that. So that is the crux of my formal presentation. But I always like to, as I was putting together this slide, I thought this was a bit of an illustration. The picture on the left here is a picture of my wife and I. And as I said at the beginning of this presentation, boy, do I miss that smile. One of the things that I tell people I miss a lot of times is we were always laughing, and many times I miss the sound of that laughter here in the house. But life goes on, and the picture that you see on the right is the picture of my son and his soon-to-be bride. They give me life. They give me hope. They let me learn that there is life on the other side of loss. As I have grown to know and to love her and become acquainted with her, and in my mind share the possibilities of them building their life together, and possibly even, if Providence is kind, making me a grandparent. It gives me fuel to continue to want to move forward, to try to take care of my health as much as I can, to be able to feel that all is not lost, even though I know it's not lost, but to have something to look forward to again. Because I believe, again, that as all of us in the human family share the fact that we have grieved, and we have lost, and it's something that we can do together. No two losses are alike. You could be in the same home and lose the same person and grieve and feel lost in a completely different and unique way. Because I tell people many times is for years and years and years, I heard people say, I know how you feel. I never say I know how you feel. At best, I can simply say, I know how it feels. So let me now open it up. If anyone has any questions, I hope that I have said something or imparted, a thought that has helped you. I appreciate so much you joining and giving me the opportunity of presenting with you.
All right, if you have a question, look to the right of your screen in the participants window. You'll see a blue hand, and just click on that to raise your hand for a question.
I do have a question, and I really appreciate the presentation.
Okay.
As I lost my mom in January, you talk about taking time to heal, and I think, is that more of a personal thing? Because for me, instead of sitting around grieving, I would rather be doing things or kind of doing my normal thing rather than thinking about it, and it kind of took my mind off of it. And to me, that would help me better than just sitting around. So would you say that's more of a personal thing about the healing?
It is. Grief and loss is the greatest designer emotion that anyone will ever experience. No two people heal and grieve alike. By saying taking time to heal, that is not only taking physical time to heal, but it's to take that mental and emotional time to pull together your coping strategy, to say, this is the way that I'm going to choose to approach it. It by no means did I say go into that winter season and become dormant and become, become inactive. Don't sit around and wait on yourself to get it together. Make your plan, set your plan together, put together on that. In my book, The First 365, and I didn't talk that much about the book, and that's shame on me. One of the things that I have in the book is what I call the 10 tenets of grief. And those 10 tenets for me were the 10 rules that I made for myself, the 10 guideposts that I put together, just as you said, the game plan as to how I was going to try to move forward. So you are absolutely right. If you chose to be active, if you chose to be busy, then you absolutely have the right to take that approach. And the other thing that I will say is this, is that there will be trial and error in this. There will be things that you try and you start and you're just not able to complete it. But it's better to try it and to have to back off than to, one, let anybody else define how you want to start to heal, or two, never try to move forward on your own.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Not a problem. So either I put everybody else to sleep or I was just crystal clear. How are we doing for time? We're good.
We're doing great.
Okay.
James, there were some people that asked for the recording or handout. Do you want to talk about how we could do that?
Yes, I will send out a link to you, to the participants. Oh, hold on for a second. And then you can be able to access the recording. Hold on for a second. We have a question.
Sure.
Hi.
Whoops. What do we do?
Oh, I think I muted her by mistake. Hold on for a second.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I'll mute. Okay.
Hi, Mr. Terrell. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good. This is a good presentation. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I have a question. How long did it take you to go from like winter to summer, or from summer
Oh my gosh.
to fall, things like that?
Oh my gosh. Let me see if I can tell you. Let me start out by answering this. First of all, first of all, the seasons aren't the same as calendars, okay? This is not, your season may be, your 365 may last 2.5, 3 years, okay? So don't think that as we look at the calendar, that needs to be your season. Your season is defined by as you emotionally and as you can physically move from one thing to another, okay? The other thing that let me say real quickly is this. If you are a person that have experienced multiple losses, you can be in spring in one loss and winter in another, okay? So I would say my process took, well, actually I was in grief counseling for 1.5 years. She basically said, I think you're ready to move on. And there are some things, real honestly, that I still maybe not as far along, but I would simply say for me, when I started to what I call feel like I was finally walking out back on my own legs, was probably about that 1.5 or 2 year mark, real honestly, for me personally. But it will be different for everyone. And be patient with yourself and be loving to yourself. And don't allow for anyone else to define you, or definitely never, ever measure where you're at against anybody else, including your own friends and family. So I would say about 1.5 or 2 years for me, really.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, Terry.
Hey, James, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, everybody, for and thank you so much for doing the presentation. By the way, it's really needed. My father passed away in September, and I can tell you that, without making it a long story, he was pretty much he was in my life. My parents divorced when I was really young, but he wasn't present in my life throughout my entire life until I became an adult. And honestly, after he passed away, I have not had any emotions about it.
Okay.
I honestly am kind of devoid of emotions about it. And I don't think I want to have emotions about it. And I just wanted to see if that was okay, what you think about that, because I look back over the years and thought, you know what, he really wasn't my dad. He was my biological father that took me every other weekend because he had to,
Sure. And I think what you were expressing is what we talked about some in those definitions. There has to be some emotional tie, not to say that you didn't have any feelings,
right?
But the reach and the depth of those feelings many times define how we manage and how we look at that particular event. One of the things that really, what I found that I had done even without knowing it, is there is a thing within the community, and definitely within the counseling and coaching community, called anticipatory grief, okay? It's very well could be the fact that due to the fact that your father wasn't present in your life, you had already moved on from that emotional tie. In many ways, that relationship had been severed and ended in some sort of way, and definitely any deep emotional way, which meant that the actual physical death may not have had as much reach in that relationship as it would have in another. But the other thing about it is don't move into this area called guilt based on I should feel or why don't I feel on that. But if you get stuck in it, or if you feel that it's affecting other areas of your life, then definitely that's when you seek, to maybe join a group or even go into one-on-one opportunities.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question. I appreciate that.
All right, Josephine, the floor is yours.
Hi, Terrell.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Josephine. I love your presentation.
Thank you.
I have a friend that lost her husband, and she was married over 50 years.
Yes.
And I can't seem to help her cope. Is there any kind of direction you can give me to help her cope?
Sure. First of all, thank you for caring and thank you for the question. Many times, one of the best things that we can do is to just simply offer to listen, and secondly, to gather and just make available to that person resources that they may want to take advantage of when they feel that they can do it. For the last, goodness gracious, 5 years, I have been a part of a magnificent group here in St. Louis called the Heartland Hospice Association. And they have tremendous resources and staff people that really meet people exactly where they are. Throughout that time, I've helped and been a part of groups there, as well as received my one-on-one counseling there. And what they do such a wonderful job of is meeting individuals where they're at. One of the things that I found that was just so eye-opening for me when I joined my first group was the fact that I was the youngest person there. Some people in that group had been married as long as I had almost been alive at that point. And they just, the gravity of their loss was just so profound to me. And many times the thing that we could do is don't take the responsibility of relieving that, even though you hate to see your friend in pain. Many times the best thing that we can do is surround them with caring, with time, with support, express your love and care, and to provide resources when they are ready for them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, Jackie.
Hi, Terrell. This is Jackie Olden.
Hi, Jackie.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I lost my husband in December.
Yes, ma'am.
And we went to the hospital about 3:00 in the morning. And Monday, I had an appointment at 4:00. And I walked outside at 3:30. And I felt like I was going to the hospital again.
Mm-hmm.
To be told that I had lost him, and
Yeah.
I was really surprised. I almost ran back in the house.
Uh-huh.
And that was the first experience I had like that since he passed.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share that because it was surprising to me that
Yeah.
it happened, that I was
Yeah.
reminded just due to the color of the sky.
Wow. Yeah. You will find, Jackie, that we will never be able to totally know our triggers. Okay? There will be things that will come up and it'll be like, where did this come from? As I talk about my book a little bit, I'm going to share what I call, as I mentioned earlier, the 10 tenets of grief, or the 10 rules that I sort of try to govern my life by. The number one tenet, the first tenet of grief that I have, is I reserve the right to be a complete and total mess anytime I need to be. And for me, it's been 5.5 years. And if something hits me that takes me to a place where I may have tears, or I may have that big sigh moment, or I have exactly what you described, that moment where out of nowhere, I will tie something to another thing. It is natural. It will happen. It is a sign that that we still have things to manage, and definitely things to experience. It is completely normal. It's completely healthy. It is something that will happen for certain.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, Deborah.
Okay, I lost my husband almost 11 years ago. It was after the birth of our sixth son. And when I lost him, there was really nothing out there. And it was actually several years before I got some of these lists like Take Time to Heal and stuff. With all this, I was trying to think of some way to make it a little more available to people during that time of loss. Is there anything to do to somehow get that started, initiated? I know when you're at the funeral home, everything's so busy and you're like in total shock, but this is something that kind of needs to be addressed like soon after they pass away, because like especially like never be afraid to ask for help. I never wanted to ask for any help because I was a person that always did it myself for the most part.
Absolutely.
And
You know, I go ahead, finish your question.
And of course, as soon as I was in that state to ask for help, nobody wants to help you then.
Well, I tell you what, where you find there is a whole, what I call a community of caring out there. And many times if there are not individuals that you think should help you, or that you can't imagine that they wouldn't help you, that is a time for you to reach out into a community of shared experience, you know, and that have been where you need to go.
Right.
There are wonderful groups out there. That's where a group such as Grief Share, you know,
I've done that.
You know, I mean, or like I said before, the Heartland Hospice Association. Sometimes many times you might even have to join an online group. Sometimes you can simply Google that and find out that there are things, you know, you might even start a group, because there may be people out there who are just waiting to have people, you know, to be able to share it with. But I cannot encourage you enough that if your needs are not getting met, keep moving, keep exploring, keep reaching, get them met.
I'm kind of looking to, I guess, help others when they get into this process.
Sure.
Because I've already got a lot of the stuff taken care of, and
Sure.
But I'm kind of looking out for people who will eventually experience a loss like this.
Yeah, start a group. Start a group. You know, see, the most important thing of it is this. Many times people don't reach out and start things because they feel like they need to be a quote unquote expert in it. Okay?
Right.
I don't put myself out there as being an expert. I am an experiential storyteller. That's where I am. I had that experience. It sounds like you have the experience, you have the desire, you know, to help, find a way to help.
Okay.
Okay.
And I really love that that thought that you gave from Elizabeth and John. That was beautiful. That was perfect.
Absolutely. It has helped me immeasurably since I found it.
Yes. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
Annetta, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to just make a brief comment. Terrell, good afternoon, everybody's on the call. My experience was maybe slightly different than yours, because both of my parents had illnesses that I knew eventually that was going to happen. So it gave me an opportunity to kind of prepare beforehand, but you don't really, it don't really hit you until it actually happens.
Oh, yeah.
And we're talking long-term illness for both of them. The same thing when I went through it with my husband. I handled it, you know, I was good at it when he passed away. But it was when I started to date someone that had an unexpected death. I spoke to him the day before and he died the next day. It took me a long time. Matter of fact, it took me a year to even face up to the fact that I'd even needed to go seek and get help. And I did eventually go do that to be able to heal. But it was like a month before I was still in the grieving process. Could not go to work, couldn't function, couldn't do anything. And finally I did support and did get help. And once I did get past that, I did reach out and continue to go. So that way I wanted other people to know that you can heal from this. And I became a part of the support group to help other people to go through their grief. So it's just that we all may be at different levels in how we handle grief and how we go about the process.
Absolutely, 1,000% right, because it sounds like in one instance, you had gone through the process of anticipatory grief. and then in another, it affected you in much different ways. And that's where we talk about the fact that you can be in winter in the season, based on one loss, and in fall or summer in a different season, in another one. It does. It really just varies based
And I
on where
think
you were.
the thing was, because I knew I was going to have to prepare with my parents. My parents
Sure.
were older when I
Sure.
was born, and my
Sure.
mother was 40, my dad was 50, so they lived a long time. One lived to be almost 80, one lived to be 71, and I was young. I lost my daddy at 23, and I lost my mom when I started taking her at 35. So I've gone through that most of my life. I have not had parents, so it's easier for me to deal with other people when they say they having to deal with their parents, they having to deal with all of this, because I had to take it on earlier in life. And I
Sure.
think as I went on in several years ago, when this person died that I was dating, it was harder for me because it was an unexpected death, because I
Unexpected.
had no
Sure.
time to prepare.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn, you're next.
Thank you. As Annetta was talking, I was thinking about maybe the cumulative effect. And you talked about how you could be in one season of grief after one loss and another season of grief after another loss. And I was wondering, do you notice, though, in talking to others or in your own experience, that cumulative effect where you handle one, you handle another one, and then, your resources are just exhausted, and a third one or a fourth one you just can't handle anymore. Maybe it wasn't as great a personal loss to you, maybe someone you knew more tangentially, but you're exhausted from your losses.
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, there are, and as we talk about these very unique times that we're in now, I think back to an associate of mine that lost his father very early in the COVID-19 situation. 5 days after he lost his father, his job let him go. And just the natural part of me being a businessman, it made me think, how could someone do that? Knowing what just happened. And I go back to this theory that business is business, it's nothing personal. And many times we get to a point where things start to accumulate. Maybe it didn't happen to you, but when I heard that happen to that young man that I had worked with, it just affected me. When you start to talking about that in cumulative effect, it was two years and 4 months between the time that my wife died and my daughter died. And as I said earlier, at about 1.5 to 2 years, I really started to feel like, okay, I'm kind of back in stride again. And 4 months later, my daughter's gone. And so when we start to talk about cumulative effect on things, it definitely can affect you. You never get good at hearing about loss. We have more tools in our belt. Writing the book has given me more tools to go back to, but it doesn't necessarily take the sting away. And there could be do people get to the point where they're no longer, sensitive to it? I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I really feel that if I ever write another book on this, I'm going to talk to people in the medical profession. I'm going to talk to people that are funeral directors. I just want to know how they can be around that every day and constantly and build up the emotional firewalls, to function.
Okay, Martin, the floor is yours. Martin, I tried to unmute you. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you for
Okay,
the
yeah,
question.
thank you very much for the talk. I'm also a widower. I have not read your book, but
Yes, sir.
looking back, my wife's last few months, we did estate planning, but there are other things I wish we had done. I tried to get palliative care, it didn't exist back then. We talked about life after she was gone with me dating, etc. But I really wish she would have written some legacy statements to our kids.
Okay.
And I don't know whether you mentioned that in your book.
I do talk about the fact of what role journaling played in in the healing process for me. But I love your idea about having legacy statements available for family. Maybe that might be something that people listening here might consider, because it does help in many cases. I mean, Robin and I never talked about death, even though she had a prolonged period of illness. We were so focused on fighting the fight that in many ways, I don't know necessarily if we were in denial, but we were in the business of battling. And I think what you talked about in creating those legacy statements and writing those thoughts, and even as something as simple as just recording their voice. One of the things that is just maddened to me many times is that I have found that in some cases I don't remember what people that I love's voice sounds like. And I'm so fortunate that I had a voice message on my phone from my wife, which is the only voice message that I have from her. And I'm so glad that I have it. I have recordings of my daughter's voice, and that will always be precious to me. So I love that idea about writing legacy statements for people that you love and that you care about. I think that's a great idea. And please buy the book. Everybody buy the book. We have enough for everybody. Buy the book.
All right. Any other questions for Terrell? If not.
We have one.
Oh, okay. Melissa, the floor is yours.
I was wondering how you would respond when there is a loss that's experienced by a community, when it's not necessarily a personal loss, but something that is experienced by a community. And I think that's something that a lot of us could relate to at this point in time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When we start to talk about general or community or group loss, we really, one of the most important things that I think we can do is talk about it. Be able to express and feel free to talk about how it affected you and how you feel about it, and and what you are going to miss about it, or how is it that we can minimize the reach, of the damage and the change that it causes. I often tell, especially when I'm talking to widowed men, that we have to remember that we get no points for suffering in silence. And many times we have to give ourselves the permission to express, how we feel, and just, ways of possibly taking a different point of view on those things in order for it to not reach in different areas or more areas in our life than we, may want it to, or, or hope to keep it from. So I believe that that's really about talking about it and trying to make plans for it and see if your view is the same as others, and try to minimize the damage that loss or change, especially as we talk about communities, that it will do, or that it does.
All right, if nothing else, we'll end this session. Terrell, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, James. I appreciate it. And thank everybody for joining. I am very honored to see these, these numbers. And I hope people will go out and take a look at where they can get the book, and definitely, hopefully, if you don't buy it for yourself, buy it for someone else. I'll put the information on the District 8 site so people know where they can get it.
Okay, and on behalf of District 8, Terrell, we really appreciate you for delivering a very valuable and powerful message that we all can relate to. So here's our certificate of appreciation for a fantastic presentation, sir.
Thank you very much. And again, I thank you very much for the invitation.
All right. And I do have a copy. So here's the book.
Yeah, I remember that. You have a signed copy even.
Yes, sir. A signed copy.
All right. Good.
Please
thank you for that.
It's well worth it. Thank you all. I really appreciate you for coming to the first installment of the Lunch and Learn. And stay tuned for the next session next Wednesday. Oh, we have one more question, I believe.
Okay.
Deborah? I try to unmute you, but I can't. Unmute yourself, Deborah.
I just hand clapped to it.
Oh, it's a hand clap.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for
All
that.
right.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all. Y'all have a nice afternoon.
Take care, James. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.